All right. Well, hello. My name is Gia. I'm here with the PHL Standard Podcast Uncut crew. And today we have State Representative Chris Rabb, who is with the 200th Legislative District. So, how are you doing today, Chris? Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. Well, I know we only have about 15 minutes here today, so let's get right into it. So I really wanted to, bring you on today. I know that there's two key pieces of legislation that you're introducing. So let's start off with the legislation that you're introducing in regards to electronic petitioning for candidates. So first of all, for our viewers, can you just explain exactly what you mean by electronic petitioning? I think, the common voter may not know exactly what that means and what the main goal of this piece of legislation is.
Sure. So I think most people don't even know what petitioning is because most people will never see it or never sign one. But every election cycle, in order for any candidate, whether they're already in office like me or a first-time candidate, has to get signatures for their nomination petition in order to get on the ballot for the whatever upcoming election there may be. So whether it's dog catcher or president, every election cycle, you have to get back on the ballot. That is something that you have to earn and re-earn. And the way to do it is to get surpass a threshold of eligible signatures from voters. And what eligible means is they have to be from the same party that you're affiliated with, and they have to live in your district. And they have to sign a piece of paper in the right way. If they sign a piece of paper in the wrong way, even though they're from the right party and they live in your district, their signatures could be knocked off. And so for races like mine, if you're a state representative and you're running anywhere in the state, you have to get 300 good signatures. Well, what happens is if the circulator of a petition, and that could be like my son or a neighbor or someone else, someone who is a registered Democrat anywhere in the state can be a circulator for a candidate. But if they do it wrong, not fraudulently, but if they make a mistake, all the signatures that they've gotten could be wiped out, which means that someone who's doing what they think is the right thing may actually have made a mistake and therefore not get on the ballot and therefore not be able to run with their name on the ballot. And if they still wanted to run, they'd be a write-in candidate, which is really, really hard to be successful. But here's the thing, we're in the 21st century. We use our phones for everything. You can register to vote on here. You can buy groceries. You can do whatever. So we have the technology and other states have it as well. So if you want to help someone get on the ballot, whether you're going to vote for them or not, but you just feel it's their right to have the opportunity to run, well, why don't we make it easy for folks and allow them to record their support of someone getting on the ballot electronically. So other states are doing this. I've conferred with the Pennsylvania Department of State who oversees elections. They said this can be done in the near future. And here's the thing. I've run in a number of races now. I'm the one who wakes up at 6 in the morning and goes to the train station and goes up to my neighbors who are barely awake trying to wait for the train saying, hey, can you sign my petition so I can get on the ballot? But if it's freezing cold or the person may have an illness or a disability that makes it hard for them to write, if they're rushing, they want to help, they want to do it the right way, but they're rushing to catch the train or get their groceries or pick up their kids from school, it's hard and they may make a minor error that somebody who has a lawyer who wants to get that person off the ballot can say, oh, well, this shouldn't count, even though that is an eligible voter. So we can avoid all the legal fees, all the drama, all the unnecessary hoops and hurdles by just going online and saying, hey, I'm going to sign electronically to get this person on the ballot. And it can be as safe as all the other things we've done. We've just come through the most significant election season of a lifetime. And Pennsylvania was at the front of the crowd in terms of doing it right, having a safe and open election. So if we can do that, we can certainly acquire electronic signatures in a secure and consistent manner.
Right, right. No, I think you outlined a lot of positives. Now, something else that I saw in there was that you actually wanted to increase the number of signatures required to run for office and then also increase the territory from where those signatures are coming from. So why do you think that that's important to kind of increase that outreach as well as the number of signatures needed?
Well, actually, what it is not the it doesn't broaden the territory in which you get signatures. So for a race like mine, you'd have to live in the 200th legislative district, which covers Chestnut Hill, Mount Airy, and West Oak Lane. The only difference is if this bill were enacted into law, candidates, whether incumbents like me or first-time candidates, would have to get a certain amount of signatures from various places, from all the different political subunits, what we call precincts or divisions. So there are 80 divisions. So it'd actually be harder and easier at the same time. We want to make sure that candidates put in the work and access voters in every single part of their district to the extent they can. Now, if you're in a rural district, that's hard, and I will be tweaking my legislation to take care of my colleagues and candidates in rural areas, because you may have a rural area where the division doesn't have enough registered voters of that affiliation to actually acquire. So the good news is it's easier for anyone to get on the ballot, but it's more labor intensive because you have to engage more people across your district. You can't just stick in your neighborhood and do it. It requires you to hit every corner of your district, which I think is a very humbling and important thing for folks to do.
Right, right. No, I definitely see where you're coming from for that. Now, in addition to the positive aspects, right, you're really trying to increase the voter outreach, really making sure that the people are looking at who is running in their district. With that being said, a potential negative, right? We see all the things about the electronic voter fraud and everything from this past election. And what would you say to a voter who is concerned about switching from handwritten signatures to electronic signatures for this nomination process as it regards to election fraud? Because, average voter may think, hey, that could open the floor to my personal data being hacked. It's going to be easier to do that, easier to affect the outcome or the nomination. So what would you say to a candidate that has that concern of, I see the positives, but there's this negative here that I'm really worried about? How would you speak to that voter?
Anyone who believes that there was rampant voter fraud in 2020 is probably someone who wouldn't support anything I do. There's no evidence of it. Even the very conservative U.S. Supreme Court has not weighed in on this because there wasn't enough evidence to prove all these rumors that still abound. So anyone who's a detractor of my bill because of perceived election fraud, there's nothing really I could say to dissuade them. But I can say this: anyone who votes, we have your data because that's public information. The only thing we don't know is who you vote for. Anyone can pay a little money and get access to every single voter's information. It has their name, address, age, gender, how they voted, not for whom they voted, but how, whether it's mail-in, in-person, absentee, provisional, all that information is out there anyway. So this would not expose them to more access by other folks. This will just allow them to be a part of the democratic process more easily and help more people get on the ballot so they actually have a choice for whom to vote on election day. Because in Philly in particular, the vast majority of incumbents never have a challenger. So when it's time for you as a super voter to come out yet again, and you only see one name on the ballot, what does that mean? What a choice of one is no choice at all. And any opportunity for folks who don't want to run a real race or trying to knock people off the ballot, who are operating in good faith. Now, if it's fraud, they should be knocked off because we should have no tolerance for fraud. But if someone makes a rookie mistake and they're doing everything, otherwise they're doing everything right, why would you do that? And the last thing for potential detractors is if you pay for a lottery ticket, that's government. And if you trust those numbers, then why wouldn't you trust electronic technology to make our lives easier on the political side. I don't hear anyone saying, "Oh, the lottery is fixed." I don't hear that. They're still paying their money, and this doesn't involve money. Involves our democracy. So we should be consistent with our outrage. If we don't trust government, you should never buy a lottery ticket again, because that is a government program.
Right. Okay. All right. So now let's switch gears here, right, to the other piece of legislation that you're introducing. So again, focus on modernizing and standardizing the nomination process for candidates seeking to run in special elections. So can you briefly explain the structural flaws that you're seeking to remedy with that piece of legislation?
Well, sure. In Philadelphia specifically, the Philadelphia City Democratic Committee amended their bylaws to say that ward leaders, the majority of ward leaders in a given legislative district can determine who the nominee is for a special election, which means if there's 7 Democrats who want to run in a special election, only one of them will get to have their name on the ballot for the special election. And who decides which of those 7 get on there are, in my case, in 2016, 2 people decided what was best for 65,000 people. That means that my district at the time was composed of 3 political wards. So they needed a simple majority. 2 out of 3 ward leaders would determine who should be on the ballot. So 2 people decided on behalf of an electorate, a Democratic electorate of around 40,000 people. That is deeply anti-democratic. Previously, the bylaws said that it had to be the majority of duly elected Democratic committee people. Well, there were 76 divisions across the district, 2 elected Democratic committee people per division. So that's roughly 150 people, and you would need the majority of those folks to weigh in. But they changed that rule. So instead of 150 people elected by their fellow neighbors, it was 2. That's a problem. Also, more people should know who's running before they make it onto the ballot, right? We should have more transparency and accountability. So there should be an open meeting of all eligible voters to listen in and hear actual candidate interviews seeking to be on the ballot. This doesn't benefit incumbents or first-time candidates. This benefits democracy as we know it, and it also gives us a level of it creates a level of trust and inclusion that does not currently exist. That is why one of the reasons we have such a low voter turnout generally, but in special elections it's barely 10%, and that's not 10% of adults. That's 10% of adults who are already registered voters. So only a tiny bit of folks in a given district decide who's on the ballot. And once they're on the ballot, they're all but elected.
Right. So with that being said, Chris, can I call you Chris?
Well, everyone calls me Rep. Rabb.
Oh, Rep.
That's how people know
okay,
me.
Rep. Rabb. We'll go with that. So with that being said, how do you expect this, or how exactly will this legislation increase voter turnout? Because you can hold these meetings and you can increase transparency, but you can't necessarily, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make it drink. So how do you see this legislation really influencing an increase in voter turnout?
Well, we have a 0% chance if we don't open it up, right? We can't make voters be interested, but that's also where media comes in, right? If media doesn't cover these issues, like you have chosen to cover these bills, the Philadelphia Inquirer hasn't covered these bills, but you have. So it involves an independent media, non-corporate media in particular, who has a concern about communities and democracy and transparency. It requires all stakeholders to see the importance of something like this. No legislation in and of itself will be meaningful unless people know about the changes that are created as a result of it, and other people promoting those changes so people know what the law is. And so this is as much a reflection of how engaged our local media is, how other stakeholders, whether there's community groups, activist groups, political organizations, they all have to weigh in and say, this is a good bill and we're going to promote and publicize these these meetings so that we can have more sunlight on the process. But if people feel disengaged because they don't have a forum to actually hear or see what's going on, then none of this matters.
Right, right. No, I think you made a good point there. You know, you at the very least have to have these meetings and give the opportunity and then kind of work on marketing through those independent channels. So last question for you here, Rep Rav. So as you know, right, we have the PA primaries. They're slated to be a very competitive race. We have many incumbents that are stepping down, along with the redistricting. Those maps were upheld by the Supreme Court. Even yourself facing a competitive race as well against Isabella Fitzgerald due to that redistricting, right? So in the bigger picture of the primary elections, and your focus, especially with these pieces of legislation to standardize, modernize, and increase voter turnout, transparency, why do you think that modernizing the election process is ultimately going to benefit the Democratic Party?
Oh, I don't think it will benefit the Democratic Party per se. It will benefit democracy. So when I introduce these bills, I'm not introducing them as a Democrat. I'm interested in helping expand and empower the electorate through transparency, accountability, and modernization. So this would not have a disproportionately positive impact on Democrats versus Republicans, urban versus rural. I have some conservative colleagues in Harrisburg who represent rural areas who are like, oh my gosh, electronic would be amazing because it would, what it takes for me to get signatures just going to a SEPTA station, most of my colleagues in rural areas, in fact, all of them, there's no public transportation. So there's no train station for them to go to. They have to go to a farm. It may take them 20 minutes to get from the start of the property to the person's home just to get one signature. So their ability to access their constituents and neighbors more easily in a different part of the state, that benefits largely Republicans. And I'm okay with that as long as it levels the playing field and makes it easier for greater participation of more Pennsylvanians, whether they're in Philly or, you know, Elk County. That's what this is about. This is not how this can have a disproportionate impact on me or Democrats or Philadelphians. In fact, this would make it harder. This would make it easier for people to run against me. And so a lot of incumbents would be like, well, I don't know if I want to do that, but right is right. And if I'm running on my track record and I believe in accountability and transparency, then I shouldn't fear however many people want to run. It's their right to run. It's still not their right to win, but it's definitely their right to run. And we shouldn't put up any barriers to folks who are operating in good faith to get on the ballot.
Right, right. Well, listen, Rep Rabb, I appreciate what you're doing out there to just increase voter turnout and help our democracy. I really appreciate you coming on our podcast today, our show today. That is all the questions I have for you. So I really appreciate your time. Again, my name is Gia, and we have State Representative Chris Rabb. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.